context, arranger, ideation, belief, and connectedness. My name is Jose Bodipo Memba. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, known as SMUD. And my biggest aha moment around learning my strengths was learning about the balconies and basements associated with belief as a strength.
I'm Darren Virassammy.
I'm Brandon Miller.
And this is The Strengths Whisper, the show empowering leaders to create, build, and sustain great places to work. On this episode, we have Jose Bodipo Memba. He's the Chief Diversity Officer at SMUD. Jose, it's so great to see you and to catch up. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks, Darren. Great to see you. Thanks for the opportunity. You've been an awesome help for me personally and for our organization. So happy to really be a part of this podcast.
You've definitely been a leader that I've known for several years now that has embodied what it means to be a people-first leader. And it's no surprise to me that you've moved into the role as Chief Diversity Officer for SMUD because you've always had an eye towards people. And I think what's really interesting from when we first connected, probably right before 2015, what was really interesting was you really wanted that focus on your team. And it's so cool that we're starting by giving context to our listeners, which is your number one strength. Context has been a huge driver for you. And I know you had originally taken the assessment back in 2010. You took it again in 2015. We might have to get you to retake it again now as you've moved into this new role. But context is one that just seems to be with you. You've had definitely some strengths exposure over the years. What does context mean to you as you understand it?
I appreciate the question. And again, it's funny because context has been something that showed up in my strength finders all the way back in 2010 till now. For me, understanding where things are, that level setting of why are we here? What are we trying to get done? What are your drivers is important for me to be able to effectively lead and also for me to be able to effectively connect and buy in whatever role. And so it's something that quite honestly, whenever I'm taking on a new team or joining a new team, I talk about context. That's where I thrive. And also I will drown in areas where I don't have an understanding of what are the drivers? What are the things in the environment that are impacting the decisions we make? So I think that when we first met, I was taking on a role in a team that I was currently on, but elevating into a leadership role over folks who were my peers in some cases, and also some folks who were in another work group that I didn't work with as closely. And so at that point, it was really important for me to understand their strengths to figure out how to best lead. I think that's kind of how that context piece shows itself. For me to really be able to move forward, I really wanted to understand the environment of the team I was with. And it really helped out with the work that you and your team did. It helped me recognize that when you have a team of multiple people and you have a leadership team that's maybe more finite, it's really incumbent upon that leadership team to make adjustments, in some cases, to meet your team where they are so that they can actually be most effective. That's, to me, how context shows up. And in the Chief Diversity Officer role, it's definitely something that is still driving me in that space.
Jose, as I was thinking about today's conversation and context in the role that you now hold, when we think of context, from a strengths perspective, and you talk about meeting people where they were at, understanding. For our listeners out there, it's deeper than just understanding where people are at. It's how did we get here? So it's the historical frame of reference, the blueprint that led to the house being built, and needing to understand that, the steps that led to this, because in understanding that story, we gain insights into, as you mentioned, some of their drivers, some of their detractors potentially, that they might have encountered along the way. And that helps create a much clearer why for us personally and for you in your style of leadership with how you've advanced as a leader, but also in understanding the why and those drivers for people so we can understand how to better connect to their needs and to move initiatives along and to create that connection with people. So context on teams, leaders that I've seen that are really strong with this, I think one of the areas of value that they bring is they naturally take a look in the rear view mirror to ask, how did we get from there to here? And then what can we learn from that journey to apply with where we want to go? It's not a component where we need to live in the past and stay in the past. But if we don't study the past, we're bound to repeat the mistakes of the past and fail to learn from the things that we did right back then. So the natural power of being able to do that can help fuel us forward as teams, as organizations, and as leaders, because it creates these anchor points and can be a well of really useful information that helps drive us forward in taking a look back as to where we've come from and being able to also celebrate, look how far we have come from where we were. Does that resonate with you, Jose?
It completely resonates. I think the word that comes to me is empathy. And I think the other piece is understanding, because it can be done at a corporate level and looking at how our organization has gotten to where it is, but also understanding how people have come to their decision-making style. What are their experiences? And that really requires you to not just do the research, but really engage and listen and seek to understand and empathize. Oh, this team has been under the gun the last 5 years to hit some quantitative metrics. And maybe that's why folks are disconnected, or maybe that's why folks don't feel as engaged moving forward. Maybe that's why there's a little bit of apathy. That's important to know, not just what were your numbers over the last 4 to 5 years. And so I recognize that for me, that also allows us to connect, because I think that people don't follow initiatives by themselves. They don't follow just directives by themselves. They follow people, because that's what we are. What you said completely resonates. And I would say that the areas in which I've had success, I've been able to engage at that level and really gain understanding of not just the what, but the why and the how. But I do think that it's also important to recognize in that space, I always talk about balconies and basements, but sometimes the basement of that can be so much of a desire to understand the context and to go back. You can get stuck in that past. And so it's funny that one of the other strengths that resonates with me throughout is my belief strength. And again, it's one of those things where in its optimal state can really help motivate, push, provide support behind initiatives, behind people, but also in some cases in its basement state can lead to a little bit of stubbornness, lead to a little bit of inability to redirect and correct the action. So one of the things I've really liked about the Strength Finders process is it gives us here in our organization some common language, and not just putting people in a box saying, oh, you're these 5 or you're these 5, but it's how those strengths align together that makes a unique individual, and recognizing that your strengths can also be this close to some of the things that are your obstacles and vice versa. What I've really found with the team when we've leveraged this tool is it's given us a chance to actually dive in and get to know and get to understand, which creates a space to ask questions. It creates a space to be curious. Then it provides folks an avenue to say, oh, I didn't realize that this is something that's actually good. Because some of these things folks have been criticized for. But now you're pivoting. You take someone on our team who was a woo, and a lot of folks that he just talks and he's just always networking and he's not getting his job done. But that same woo right now is thriving because we've been able to leverage that connection, and he's building relationships within the organization. He's building relationships in the community. He's teaming with folks who complement his strengths. And by having that conversation, it pivoted what was a criticism and turned it into something that, wow, is invaluable. I think the folks who are going to be listening to this podcast probably are bought in on the Strength Finders concept, but it's been really transformational, I think, for the teams that I've been able to lead here at SMUD. And the fact that the legacy of those programs, those teams and those individuals who've elevated from entry-level staff to supervisor to manager roles are continuing to dive in and double down shows the effectiveness of the methodology that Strength Finders and 34 Strong have brought to our organization.
I really appreciate you sharing that story, Jose, about a team member that had woo, and woo was out. They're just out talking and connecting. And it's easy to just look at a role and just say, this is the box that we need to hit. This is the metrics. These are the numbers that we have to get to, and miss the contributions that might be a little bit more subtle that somebody might make through relationship building and influencing and championing an idea, which is what woo will do. Woo stands for winning others over. And it is important, as Jose, You mentioned understanding what are known as the balconies and basements of strength. So balconies are when the strength is operating in more of its optimum area. That's the strengths of the strength. The basements are more of the shadow side, and that's the watchouts. Those are when those strengths are actually becoming our greatest obstacles and our weaknesses. And when we hear this notion of strengths-based thinking in different organizations, it's easy to say, sure, that's a bunch of garbage. You can't just focus on your strengths. We have to acknowledge our weaknesses. And that's actually 100% correct. In owning our strengths, we have to own our weaknesses and our gap areas. And when we understand other strengths, we can understand how those complement each other well. It becomes this whole notion, Jose, of well-rounded teams. Because when we allow that to go through, we allow others to shine in our gap areas. And we start taking that frustration of, oh, this person is a woo. They just go out, they talk to everybody, and start saying, we need this message. We're doing everything right, but we don't have anybody that's championing what we're doing right, and allowing that to be seen in the organization, in the community, in the impact that can have, and creating that buy-in. Who's going to do that? Because you can check all the boxes of doing the work, hitting the numbers. Nobody knows about it, and we're not effectively moving the needle within the organization and carrying that through. And somebody might need to be that champion that goes out there and does that effectively. And maybe that's how folks can show up. So it gives us a chance to kind of have that reset. One of the pieces that you shared about your own leadership that was really interesting was a team that you had stepped into in the past where it was just numbers that we've been given. That was all that was being focused on. And you mentioned something along the lines of, I've got to understand the context of people, of where they're at, so we can be able to move them forward. Because at the end of the day, that's all we are. We're just humans that are working together. And it's easy in large organizations and small ones as well to get stuck on the wagon, Jose, of needing to check the box, needing to be doing all the time. And I think it's important for us to remember that we are human beings, not human doings. And when we lean into the being side of what is it that drives us to be, then we can become far more effective at the doing side, because the being side is actually fulfilled. Does that make sense?
Completely. So Darren, you and I talked about before, I took on the role here as Chief Diversity Officer at the end of 2022. And a big part of that role was really creating a new vision for our organization. So the organization I lead is our Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Group. Again, so we connect with all the employees here at SMUT. We also connect with a number of community groups as a part of the work that we do as well. And so when we looked at the vision, our vision is built around the concept of powering people, partnerships, and progress. And it's people first for a reason. We are the backbone of the people component of our organization. We make sure that our employees are whole, that our employees are doing well, and that our culture drives that. You can let culture happen to you, or you can intentionally try to drive culture in a way that is beneficial to the most employees. So the thoughts behind that vision was making sure that we are people first. I share this, and we had an employee recently pass away, and it hit us hard because we're a people-focused organization, that we have individual relationships that go beyond titles. I got my promotion, shot me a note via email and on LinkedIn. I was one of the first people to reach out. We don't even do a whole lot of work together, but the fact that our organization had cultivated this people first component, I feel blessed to have had that interaction, which makes the pain of this even more difficult. But I also think in the end, having an organization where people do matter is for the betterment, and that we can grieve together, and then we can celebrate when great things happen together. The idea of powering people, partnerships, and progress is more than a phrase. It really is about, if we get the foundation of people first, the partnerships come because you have a connection with each other as people. And then the progress comes because we're now working in a collaborative way and we're all moving forward. That's the vision. That's where we want to be. That is a driver. And I think that the Strengths Finders piece has helped me better understand my why and connect that to kind of the direction of the organization overall.
Thanks for sharing that. The powering people, partnerships, and progress. I love how that resonates in the business of what SMUD is actually in, right? So for those of you that don't know, SMUD, they're a power supplier for Sacramento, in the Sacramento region. They do a lot more than that, but that's one of their core lines that they do. They keep the lights on, keep electricity flowing for the Sacramento region. And I think that is a really powerful way of utilizing the word powering people, partnerships, and progress, because the people are the electricity that electrifies SMUD and allows SMUD to provide the electricity for the Sacramento area. I want to jump into your connectedness strength before we take this off into a little bit of a different direction based on what some of the things that you stated there about being people first, about your own career, your own drivers, your own why. Now, connectedness, Jose, is a strength that is a relationship building strength in nature. It leads through the lens of seeing people and connecting. It's a very big picture strength. We talked about your belief and how that can help guide you towards the work that you should do and towards your own personal mission and even the mission that you want to focus on and the why you do what you do internally within SMUD. Connectedness is this big picture strength that is able to see the big picture, but it sees all of the different directions that we can go through the lens of who are the people that are going to be impacted, good or bad, and touched along the way in our organization, in our community, through our partnerships. Who should we be thinking about? And that priming of being able to see the big picture of all the things that we're doing in the business and within our culture. A statement I make often is you either have culture by intention and design or by accident, but you're going to have culture one way or the other. This is part of your natural driver towards this whole notion of culture by intention and seeing that through the lens of the people that are impacted in everything that you do in your own why.
Again, connectedness is something that has existed on my strengths from 2010 and 2015. I think that what's interesting in that space, it kind of goes back to my upbringing and my leadership models. I grew up in the North Bay, little town, Nevada. We were amongst a few Black families in the town that was predominantly Caucasian. As a kid and as a person, you always wanted to be a part of the group. And I think that for me, academics and athletics were ways for me to get connected to groups and culture and space growing up. I feel like those were all privileges that were bestowed upon me based off of things that my parent poured into me and some blessings from above and to allow me to be in those spaces. But I don't think I've ever forgotten what it feels like to be on the outside. And I think that part of the privilege that we all have is that when we're in rooms and when we're in spaces is to think about those of us who don't have that opportunity. It's bringing other voices to the table, literally, and also being able to speak for other voices that aren't at the table to make sure that their presence is there. I think it's a requirement or responsibility. So one of the things I think how that shows up in my leadership style is, like you said, it's trying to look big picture, because in the work that we do, we need to understand what are the unintended positive and negative consequences of the decisions that we make. So I think part of that is also being intentional about gathering that information. Right now, we have about 2,500 employees at SMUD. We're working in a hybrid environment post-COVID. How do we make sure that as we're redefining our culture, that we're hearing from everyone? So one of the things that I've been doing is trying to find some different ways to reach. So we do something that's called a one SMUD walk. We have 2 campuses. I do 1 walk a month at each campus. Anyone can come. We bring folks from different parts of our organization together. It's an opportunity for me to hear what's going well. What were some of the gaps? I just had someone reach out the other day. They said, the idea is great, but those of us who are on the field crews can't participate. I'm like, thank you for reaching out. Let's work together on solutions. So right now we're this close to having a solution that will allow even the field crew to actually be involved so their voices are heard as well. And I think that's my responsibility, because if I'm going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, I've got to be able to find different ways to reach all the different employees that we have. That means ethnic backgrounds. That means language backgrounds. It means cultural backgrounds. That means work backgrounds, geographic backgrounds. So I think part of that strength is trying to find ways to bring those voices to the table. And I don't think there's a perfect answer or someone who's got it right. But I would like to say that one of the reasons why I'm in this role now is I've been fairly successful at bringing diverse groups, voices to the table to come up with better solutions. And part of it, I think, is also based off an authenticity of knowing that you don't have to have all the answers to the questions, but you need to be honest and open to listen. And I think that has been a methodology that's been really effective in my life, because then when sometimes you just listen, you'd be surprised at what you learn. One of my mentors early on told me, he says, the best way to learn in your career, find the people you admire or find the people that you don't understand, take them to lunch and ask them questions. You'll understand, going all the way back to the context piece, why, how, what they're scared about, what they're excited about. And I've tried to apply that in my career, not just from a mentoring standpoint, but even how we interact with our staff. So what's been cool about these walks is every walk has been different because we get feedback from employees saying, hey, can we go visit this area? Or maybe we should try doing a tour of this special building. This last week, I have a couple of facilities folks said, hey, we'd love to show off some of the great work we've done over the last 2 years. Now this is something that they own, even though it's, quote, my walk. And it grows because it's an opportunity for folks to really feel connected to the process. So I think that's one of the ways in which connectedness shows. And I think at its optimum in my day-to-day, I am able to bring other perspectives to the table to make better decisions happen. In the basement side, maybe there's a desire to get everybody aligned, and sometimes that's not always possible because we have to still make difficult decisions sometimes. We got to be comfortable making those 80% decisions instead of those 100% decisions. That's definitely the optimal goal.
Jose, there's just so much in what you just shared about that process with the walks, with different areas that you've learned over your career. One of the key important pieces that I want to extract from that is the power of creating neutral ground on which to meet. If you tell somebody, hey, let's have a meeting, come to my office, there's already power dynamics that are at play. When you go to their department, there's power dynamics. When you go to a coffee shop, you're going to have all of these other environmental factors that are going on. You're going to have all these different things that are taking place when you're having lunch. And the environment is not yours. It's not theirs. It creates an opportunity to just see the person and see each other and them see you, not in a place where, hey, I'm sitting on this side of the desk, you're on that side of the desk. And there's something about the power of walking with people. When you're walking, we're doing things and creating a biological rhythm. So physiologically, we've created a rhythm that we're working together in tandem and we're moving in tandem, and having those conversations is powerful. Steve Jobs was notorious for his walking meetings. He'd just say, hey, we need to have a meeting. Let's go take a walk. And you'd have good conversations. You'd have some intense conversations. People would talk about. Bottom line is the conversations could be had, but it creates a space in which to do that. And some organizations have even folded that in the hiring process, where one of the interviews is not in the office. We're going to neutral ground. We're just going to have a meal and just observe, hey, how are you treating the wait staff, the people that are serving you? Because if you can't treat them right, how are you going to treat the people that you lead? How's that going to happen? And those create these environmental factors. I've seen many different organizations that have gone that route. It is important in creating those spaces because people are more likely to take off their corporate persona a little bit more when they go out. You're still going to have some of those edges, but you're going to see a little bit more of revealing who they are, getting that context, really understanding them as a person and creating the opportunities.
You picked up on something that I haven't shared with many people. You talked about the power of walking and communication. The real impetus for me was Dr. King, and recognizing that the purpose of marching during the civil rights movement was about the connection. It was bringing disparate groups together behind an idea. It created conversation. One of our close family friends, a gentleman by the name of Richard Pike, who was a minister and who marched at Selma. And one of the things he shared with me was the strength of that Selma march for him as a Caucasian man. It was the first time that he had been led by African Americans, and that many of the white pastors that were there had been led by African American people. And in that space, it created connection. It created an opportunity to see the world from a different perspective. And one of the things he shared about that walk was, this is what you're going to experience. You're going to get yelled at. You're going to get spit on. You're going to get attacked. And you're going to be asked to follow and restrain yourself. And if you cannot do that, we're going to ask that you do not participate. We appreciate your support, but you're going to have to follow the lead of this individual in terms of how we respond. So when we were having this conversation, it was pulling back that context piece on why did they choose to march? A big part was the strength that you talked about and the connection that comes from conversation and song and presence and movement. So from a strategic standpoint, it was also relying on the work of others and then trying to apply it to this context. Because we're in a space right now, we've had a lot of political strife. We're dealing with just coming out of a pandemic. We're dealing with all of the differences that exist in our organization. So that was the idea. I just wanted to at least provide that context, given that you set that up. It was definitely aligned with the idea.
That was a true gem. Thank you. I learned a lot about you, about your perspective and going through it. And that is also, for us as listeners, the power of context. What Jose just demonstrated there in sharing that backstory of the why we're doing what we're doing and how those dots have connected forward in his life. That's really powerful. And to quote Dr. King, we come back to, if you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But no matter what, keep on moving forward. And I think in that quote and in what you shared, the power of movement to create that alignment and knowing that we're moving forward, we're advancing, and it might not feel like it sometimes when we're first starting. When that plant first breaks ground, it doesn't feel like it's going to produce anything. And then all of a sudden, years later, it's providing us shade. It's providing fruit for us in these different areas. It's just the importance of tilling the soil, of continuing to do the work, keep moving forward, keep having the walks, keep creating connection, and more, it will grow. And it will create these opportunities for larger levels of forward movement. But it has to start somewhere. And we don't know what starts here, how it's going to inspire generations of the future and where that's going to lead. And part of the work that I feel like you're doing was with the work that you're doing for the future. It's not only for the SMUD of today, for organizations of today, right? Like in modeling the way, it's also helping to set a new bar of what could be for other organizations that might be looking to SMUD as such an important part of the community. I want to ask you, when you think of just strengths-based thinking and this philosophy of what you've learned over the years of trying to understand people through the lens of their strengths, whether you had Clifton Strengths Finder results or not, but understanding their needs, how they are naturally wired to contribute. Are they relationship builders? Are they the ones that are going out building the networks? Are they the ones that really do the deep thinking and ask the questions? Or are they tackling tasks, getting things completed? Whatever it is, regardless of if you knew their strengths profile or not. How do you connect understanding strengths to focusing on developing EDI initiatives within organizations? Do those two things go together? What do you see as a chief diversity officer? How do those come together?
I think when you look at DEI initiatives, I think a lot of them have serious gaps because they're just that. They're initiatives. They're a plan and it's a report. DEI really has to be something that an organization is investing in as a part of how it does business. So when I look at strength-based evaluations of people and of organizations, it is really taking a look at, does a company recognize and value having different perspectives to move it forward? And the reality is the innovation that we need in the energy industry requires different skills. It requires different experiences. In Sacramento County, we are the second most diverse region in the United States when it comes to ethnic diversity, language diversity. So for us to be able to reach our 2030 zero carbon goals and make sure that the Hmong community and the rural communities in Wilton and the Southeast Sacramento County and the Russian community that's primarily concentrated in our north part of our county, and African Americans that are in different parts of our county, that low income communities, and that everybody we serve can benefit, participate, contribute. We have to be able to have those different strengths at the table. We have to have woos that can go in the community and get folks excited and connected. We have to have more analytical individuals that can do some of the technical work and troubleshoot. We have to have every different perspective to move it forward. So to me, they're definitely connected. You can't have one without the other. And you have to recognize that the old thought process that an energy company just requires one mindset, that won't work. And what I've really liked about being here at SMUD is there's always been a recognition of the need for diversity of perspectives. But I think back to the intentionality of recognizing for us to take it to the next level, particularly to reach these aggressive zero carbon goals and to avoid the unintentional negative consequences that could have a really detrimental generational impact on underserved communities, it requires us to be intentional and look at, okay, what is the strength of a neighborhood like South Sacramento? One of the strengths is there's a number of opportunity areas for us to invest and create new business. And for us to do that, that requires some additional investment in education, investment in connecting organizations and partnering, aligning folks behind some of our goals. And that's leveraging strengths. We have a partner. They're great at getting community members trained in workforce development. All right, do that. Help us out. We'll help you understand the skills that we need. We have an organization that's great at doing environmental outreach. We're trying to get the word out on a program we have. Can you help us get the word out? It literally is intermingled in our approach. We have a community impact strategy that we're rolling out. And the whole point of that strategy is to leverage the strengths of our community partners so that the impact of our work benefits everybody. So we haven't called it Strength Finders, but it literally leans on those core competencies. So to me, to really effectively do internal and external DEI, we have to embrace that difference that comes out of this conversation. It's best case, align people in areas where they can maximize their skills and then organize organizations in manners that allow those complementary skills to do their best work. What I think it does in its best case is it breaks down silos. So the best part about our community impact strategy, we have 5 organizations within SMUD that are all collaborating on that effort. When maybe a few years back, it would have just been one group and there would have been a lot more shrapnel from some of the work done because we wouldn't know the full context piece. It just proved again that the Strength Finders piece has worked for me and helped me better understand my strengths and hopefully help the organization overall. Back to the original answer to your question, for us to really embrace DEI, we have to be able to embrace the concept of leveraging strengths.
That's it. And at the core of a strengths-based approach to organizational development, to workforce development, differences are an advantage. And what we have found in our work at 34 Strong, Jose, is as organizations have embraced strengths, it's opened up the door to having meaningful conversations that move from conversations and just initiatives into actually how that benefits the organization, the community, the partners that we have, the clients that we serve in many places. And it's been very interesting in that because at the core, differences are truly an advantage. We're living through a time where it seems like, hey, if we're different, we shouldn't be talking to each other. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We need to be talking to each other because that blend is our greatness as humanity. Jose, we could talk a lot longer, but I want to be respectful of your time, our listeners' time. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for showing up so strong today, for giving us even a deeper look behind the context of the context today with that Dr. King story that you shared and so many other great nuggets. So thank you, Jose, for joining us today. And to our listeners here, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of The Strengths Whisperer. I want to ask, what did you take away from our conversation with Jose? You can email us at Brandon, BRANDON at 34strong.com. And I want to let you know that if you're ready to discover your top 5 strengths, just include the subject line top 5 in that email, and we'll send you a code to take your Clifton Strengths Assessment. Jose, I know people are going to want to learn more about you. What's the best way to follow you, to stay connected to what you're doing, just as a person and as Chief Diversity Officer now at SMUD?
If you want to find out more about what SMUD's doing, definitely you can go to www.smud.org. And there's lots of information there. You search for my name, Jose Bodipo Memba. A lot of the work that I'm working on will pop up, and you can talk about what we're doing in the workforce diversity and inclusion space. And also you can look up the community impact plan there as well. I also am on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is JOSEBODIPO-MEMBA. And definitely happy to have folks send emails or send messages that way. Is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And again, Darren, I just thank you for the opportunity and the partnership on this. It's just been a great journey since 2014. I just look forward to doing even more great work together, and I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing throughout the country and help folks discover their strengths.
Jose, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. And to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on the Strengths Whisperer. We will see you soon.